From the last quiz.
The last quiz.
Last quiz. Take out your notes. Get those little things in. Help you out for the unit test as well.
Okay, so quiz review. We're reviewing important stuff that some of the content. Basically, this is all quiz answers that you guys got wrong. That most of you guys got wrong on the first quiz.
Yeah, so we're kind of going over based on what we were grading. These were the questions that were missed the most, so they had like the highest percentage of getting correct. We're gonna show you guys the answers were and where you could find them as well. So we're gonna start off with the basic, right? We're gonna start off with the economic system. We're gonna talk about the first three that we.
Oh, sorry.
So we have these three, right? We have a chart here, this wonderful chart that compares economic systems, right? We have the traditional, the command, and the market. If you guys want to make a little note, this is actually your textbook. It's organized as the advantages of a traditional and the disadvantages of a traditional, right? You have some examples. It's stable is one of the advantages, lower standard of living and not a lot of innovation. The same thing with command. You have a list of advantages, right? Capable of dramatic change, like the example of Russia from an agricultural to an industrial type of economy. To some of the disadvantages that you don't get all the wants and needs that you don't get to choose a lot. And it's a less effective for people like to get to work and a lot of bureaucracy, and there's not a lot of change. The market, it adjusts and it's gradual. It's not as dramatic and drastic as a command one. And it's a free market. It's decentralized, right? The government isn't in charge of it. It's all the private companies. They're the ones who get to decide what happens with the economy. Those would be some of the advantages. The disadvantages are that sometimes the workforce and like your rights they're uncertain, and there's always competition. There's always room for change. You don't have to copy all this down because literally this whole graph is in your book. Organized like this, so there was like 3 or 4 questions on the quiz that said, hey, what are the disadvantages of the command or the advantages of market? They were all right there. Nice and organized. So please double check from your chapter. What was it? Pages 40 to 80, 30? It's like probably like half a page of one of those transcript pages. So these were the 3 different ones. And then I just wanted to clarify to compare and contrast economic systems. These are great to jot down. They're super nice and quick. So we have the command economy, and we usually relate the command economy to communism and socialism, right? It's more centralized. The government is the one that's taking care of it, right? We have lots of regulation, a lot of nationalization of things as well, like copper and cheating, right? Once they took in power, they're like, hey, let's get all the industry of copper and we'll take control of it. Also in the aircrafts, sometimes even the oil, like in Venezuela, it was nationalized. So the earnings goes to the government, right? We have this, Partido Guatemalteco del Trabajo, the PGT, the PGT. What do you guys see here? Something that seems kind of similar. Soviet Union, right? Russia, USSR. We have the hammer. Also, it kind of, no lie, it kind of does. It has very similar to USSR with the colors, right? What is that called again? I forgot. The sickle, right? The sickle, what do you usually use a sickle for? Right? Yeah. So it's like farming, right? And then Then we have the hammer. Hammer, right? Who usually use these kinds of things? Farmers, workers, right? It's workers. It's for the people. The community, right? La comunidad, the commune. They're the people that are in charge of it, right? Everybody, the equality. You're always trying to aim for equality. We had important people that believed in these ideals. Like Che Guevara. Does anybody know who Che Guevara is?
Yes.
Or have you guys at least seen this face before? Maybe on a t-shirt?
Yes. Oh.
Maybe a t-shirt, right? You guys are going to see another great image later. But Che Guevara, the ideals, right? He saw a lot of poverty. He went through, there's even a movie, Motorcycle Diaries. He rode all around South America and Argentina, and he saw a lot of poverty. People were starving to death. He didn't think it was cool. He didn't think it was right. Then why are some people super rich, and there are others that are dying and don't even have access to food or clean water? So the ideals of communism and a command economy is that it's classless, right? We try to aim towards equality. We try to level it out so everybody has the benefits of food, access to food and healthcare. Again, in Central America, where we saw that there was a lot of movements for socialism and communism. For example, this is in Nicaragua. Esos son los candidatos del pueblo, the pueblo. These are the candidates of our city, of our community. And it's all about the community. It's trying to gain that equality and making sure that everybody has access to everything. Then, do you guys got that? Any questions on command economy? Good? Now we're going to discuss a little bit about the market economy, right? It's capitalism and free market. Government isn't in charge in this situation. We have the companies, right? Everything's privatized. Privatization. I have a really hard time with that. And it's deregulated. It's decentralized. The government isn't in charge. It's all the different corporations, right? And it's the competition between them that makes sure that the economy is kind of balanced and it's kind of going. So we have some characteristics here. We're able to own private property, right? We don't have anybody telling us we can't own anything. We have the freedom of choice. We have different choices, right? We have competition. That's what makes it accessible for all, and that's why we get some different prices. We have the supply and demand. People want more t-shirts, or do people want more backpacks? And then the prices fluctuate between that. And the government isn't really in charge. So this weekend, because it's really working out again, I haven't been working out, but I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I was looking for resistant bands, right? Resistant bands because sometimes I get really lazy to go to the gym. So I was like, oh, maybe I can use like resistant bands at home and work out. And I went. It was $35 friggin' bucks. I was like, it's just for like a piece of plastic, like rods maybe. So exactly. So I have all these different options, right? So I went to Dick. It's because I was at the mall and I was like, oh, let me go check in there. And then if we can. So you can go there, right? But then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna check in Amazon. I checked in Amazon. It was like $20, but for like a much bigger set, it has great reviews, and it gets shipped to my house. So this is a perfect example of like the free market. You get to, yeah, because I don't have Prime. Sorry, I can't afford it. But I have these options, right? It's the free market. That's why, like, I can even go to Ross or Marshalls, because I know Marshalls too, and Nordstrom Rack has like all amazing deals on exercise stuff. But it's that ability to make those like options and different, like I have different prices, right? I have accessibility. This isn't for me, but this is definitely for me. So it's that there's not a lot of regulation. There's no one entity saying, hey, all the prices have to be this. You have the competition. So that kind of like helps fluctuate and helps the market be stable. And as I said, competition is key. Meritocracy, it's about the merit, it's about the special talents and what the people are able to offer, the competition. Then we have the mixed economies, right? most countries are mixed economies. If you really think about it, we've learned about the traditional, the command, and the market. But none of them are truly just one thing. They're always a mix. So some of them have characteristics of all three. And like I said, the government is involved in safeguarding the people in the markets. Just like how we have the FDIC, the one for the bank loans, so we don't have like a super crazy situation like in the Great Depression, that the banks didn't repay people. So that's like a government entity that's actually helping us out. We also have that the government takes in large roles like the military, international trade, sometimes transportation. They manage our social welfare programs as well. But we also are able to enjoy things like maybe private property. We have that opportunity. We have the supply and demand market that kind of fluctuates the price and changes the price around. And we're also driven by self-interest. Some governments are more market or in the middle, or some of them go more to command. It depends, right? Even though it might go from one way to the other, I want you guys to make sure to know that it is a mix, though. Because a lot of people you may ask, they're like, "Oh, what type of economy are we?" And they're like, "Oh, we're like capitalist, we're economy." We are, but not entirely. Any questions on this?
So what's the most common kind of economy in the world? Mixed. Yes. That's one of the things to take away. Very important.
Yeah, nothing's just one. Nothing's black and white. There's always black or white. It can be both. There's a lot of gray area.
Wait.
Oh, go back. Oh. I was trying to get this like image though, two shopping carts. Just like questions. So mixed economy. Free market under dictatorship? Is that even possible? Yes. That was something that you guys had to take away, that even though there was a dictatorship, for example, in Chile, right? Pinochet, it wasn't just socialism and a command economy. It was actually a free market economy. So in Chile, Pinochet used brutal repression to enforce a market economic system. He privatized a lot of public assets, like the pension funds, right? To support entrepreneurs, sometimes risky entrepreneurs, but he helped support them by privatizing public assets. So this is directly from your book, and he gave an example. This was one of your quiz questions. So, we were talking about isolationism and in the path of economic development that combined socialism and isolationism. But in Chile, that didn't happen. They took in the growth of capitalism when it privatized airplanes, telephone services, and utilities. Like in Colombia too, the telephone service used to be owned by the government. My mom actually worked for Telecom. They had great pensions and everything, but depends on the country. The country even used billions of deposits in its pension funds to apply capital to new entrepreneurs. As a result, many industries prospered, and Chile now exports copper, paper and pulp, fruit, and chemicals. Today, Chile has one of the strongest market-oriented economies in the region. It is extensively engaged in foreign trade and has the strongest financial institutions in the region. The conversion to a free market economy is now complete and has been a resounding success. Wow. Chile's done, right? They're done, no more more history. They have every problem set, right? The textbook is great, but you guys always, when you're given information, take it with a grain of salt. Use what you know. Do you guys see anything about a dictatorship here? You guys see anything about the bombing of a palace or how a lot of people were in repression? Is this kind of biased?
Yes.
What are some words that kind of like relate to that? What do you like? Take a quick little glance. Maybe like one or two words that you're like, man, this is too good to be true. Prosper. Yeah. Not everything's just so much simple, right? What other ones? What other ones? Yeah, the strongest. Compared to who, right? They're making us think the strongest financial, right, institutions in that region. How about that last sentence? Resounding success, right? Who says like you're done? And it's now complete. When is anything ever complete? Especially since we're still living. Always take this with consideration. Also, this is great practice for we were talking about the CSET. Like there's different options for like questions. It's like anytime you see the word, it's always this, or it will never occur, or implicitly this will happen. Nothing's ever done. So whenever you see like those dramatic and drastic conclusions, it's probably not true, right? So always take that into consideration. This one, it's just taking on one perspective. Like we actually had a really like long discussion on Friday. Like we see this textbook and it's making us like, it's kind of like trying to develop this thing like, hey, you guys, capitalism is good. It's the best option. Everybody should think the same. In reality, it's not, right? Like we said, it's a mixed economy. Not one thing is better than the other. Maybe a combination of all, but always, when you read, take in your own perspectives and bring in your own sense, like your mind, because you don't have to take everything it gives you. So we got, like I said, we had Pinochet's, right? Disappearances, torture, like we're kidnappings. So we also had to take all of the history into consideration as well.
So I think from this slide, a couple of the things that we want to make sure you walk away with is number one, just having a baseline understanding of the facts of what Pinochet's policies were. That, you know, he, whether you think it's a good thing or not, he privatized the pension system and used those pension deposits to fund entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial projects. Some people think it was a great idea. The folks who wrote the textbook think that it was one of the best ideas in Latin American history. Other folks would have a different opinion. The reality is, so yeah, some people think it was great. The reality is there have been huge protests against this pension policy in Chile since like 2007. And so there are some folks who think it's been super successful. There's other folks who critiqued it quite a bit. But at the baseline, that's what Pinochet's policy was. Privatizing, right? And as well as eliminating social services, so getting rid of different kinds of welfare programs, different kinds of educational programs, health programs, and focusing on privatizing a lot of industries, including the pension and a lot of other natural resources. The other thing we want to make sure you walk away with is understanding what is missing from this textbook summary, which is the fact that this was made possible through a brutal and violent dictatorship. And that's not always recognized by our textbooks because it doesn't fit into this comfortable story of the free market brings freedom to everyone. But the reality is we have to understand, like, a command economy can be under a dictatorship and a market economy can exist under a dictatorship. And it's helpful to just kind of see how complex reality can really be. So hopefully you guys can walk away with those two kinds of understandings to be ready for the next one.
There can be a combination of either. Just command economy doesn't always have to be associated with communism or socialism. And free market doesn't always have to be recognized with democracy. So it's interchangeable. So speaking a little bit more about the pensions, large pension companies were using most of that profit. So based on the statistics and everything, with the privatization of the pension stores, the GDP went up. There was less poverty. Everything looked great, right? Because the workers, they were investing their pension in private companies. Those private companies would then invest in entrepreneurs, sometimes risky business, right? Then they make a profit. This is kind of very similar to the loans. Remember the loans? People would deposit your money in the bank. Loans get deposited in, and then they take out the money for loans for entrepreneurs. They make a little bit of interest. Some of the profit goes to the bank. Some profit goes back to you. Remember that a little bit? This is kind of similar. Workers would invest in the private investors. They would invest in private risky entrepreneurs. They make a little bit of profit, right? But then the profit, whatever would come back, it wasn't going back too much to the workers. A lot of it was going back to the companies. And now we have this issue that a lot of people are trying to come back, right? Wait, can I see the? So a lot of the profits coming back, but it's not going back to the workers. And these private companies are like saying, like, hey, the profits we usually made the most. So most of it is gonna go to us, right? In Chile, 73% of the retirement savings come from the profits of investment. Just 27 come from the contributors. So they're not making the investment. They're saying that the larger companies are. So people now, they're not getting their pensions, and they're not very high. They're expecting right now people to live on a pension of like $300 a month, and that should be enough. To be honest, I can't even make like I need like at least 100 like a week or 2 weeks for food and everything, but not counting gas and rent and all of that. Imagine like a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old trying to have to live off of $300. So like Mr. Connect said, and right now there's a lot of protests going on in Chile, and it's been going on for a while. So we also have to take in consideration, even though the numbers look great, doesn't necessarily mean it's great for all. A little bit better on the pension. So again, trying to reiterate, communist ideals, right? Usually in the ideal communist and communism command economy, you don't have private property. So we have our Karl Marx frog over here. Hippity hoppity, abolish private property. That's the idea. You have no private property. We also have this idea of classless society. We don't have the super rich with this huge gap with the lower class, right? We're trying to make sure that everyone's equal. The issue is that sometimes, instead of like the super rich, this kind of becomes the government at times. So in an ideal world, in a command economy world, we would all be equal. But we also have to consider the facts that that doesn't necessarily always happen, as we can see in real life situations. And we also work together, right? It's for the common good. Everybody works, so everybody does the same, not the same thing, but everybody works in order for everybody to have equality. Instead of usually working for the rich. And here we have a short video discussing a little bit more about neoliberalism, and that was also a question from the quiz that some of you guys were a little bit had a little bit of a challenge with, so we're gonna see if maybe it works. Yes.
Neoliberalism is a term for the political and economic policies associated with unrestrained free market global capitalism. The term was popularized in the 1980s by Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and economist Milton Friedman, and is still
The Chicago Boys.
Proponents of neoliberalism see free markets and free trade as a foundation for human flourishing, creating the most favorable conditions for individual liberties, job growth, technological innovation, and transnational collaborations that promote peace and global prosperity. They believe that government interference with free market systems promotes waste, inefficiency, and stagnation. They reject regulations on industries, high taxation, and public services that are not subject to market competition, and believe in shrinking the size of government and restricting its functions to the protection of private property through policies and law enforcement, the facilitation of global commerce, and the maintenance of a strong military. Critics of neoliberalism argue that neoliberal policies exacerbate rather than mitigate economic and social inequalities. They cite the effects of unregulated capitalism and the reduction or removal of safety nets typically provided by governments to support those who are economically and socially vulnerable. More fundamentally, many critics assert that neoliberalism fails to account for structural forms of violence, such as systemic poverty, racism, and other forms of discrimination. They argue that these hinder equal access to the benefits of free market capitalism that neoliberals imply are universally shared. By failing to acknowledge structural forms of oppression, many neoliberals assert that it is individual failings rather than systemic inequality that lead to social and economic vulnerability. As with other political and economic systems, religions function to both support and challenge neoliberalism in local, national, and global contexts.
So we have this idea that neoliberalism should be decentralized, right? It's the idea that the government should have nothing to do with the economy. It's decentralized and it's limited. And we should let the free market solve all the problems. Let the corporations do what they need. Deregulate everything. This should help our economy boom. This is the most important thing ever, right? So the main focus is government is limited, decentralized, and the companies are deregulated. So let them flourish and let them do their thing in order for us to have a stable economy. We need that competition.
We're gonna take a really quick moment for a quick announcement from Ms. Kenta.
I know a lot of you are interested in Trade Tech, so Trade Tech will be here tomorrow at 9 o'clock during the advisory in the classroom next to me. Used to be the YPI office. It will still be there. So make sure if you're interested in Trade Tech tomorrow during advisory, 9 o'clock, okay? Please be there. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So another question was that what was an economic cause of immigration? So immigration to the U.S. Right here we have this image, right? It's a map. Map of what? Of what? The world. Yeah, and so it's the U.S. military and CIA interventions since World War II, right? So let's see our key here. Targeted countries. These are the countries that the U.S. and CIA were like, you know what, we need to intervene here. The little fire things, U.S. bombings. That's where the U.S. bombed the different countries. And then we have the lines there, the U.S. government assassination plots. So this is everywhere where they're like, you know what, we need to bring someone down. Or, we don't like this person who's saying these kind of things, let's see what we can do about it. We're going to concentrate, as you can see, it's a lot, right? Looking at this, I had no idea there were so many assassination plots all around the world. So we're going to concentrate here in Central America, right? Because during the Cold War era, we were scared of communism and socialism. Ronald Reagan here would stop communism in Central America, right? We were scared of socialist ideals being spread to the U.S. So I found this wonderful comic. Well, it's not wonderful, but it's like a great way to explain, kind of like the military-industrial complex. So we have here, it's the headquarters, right? We have this general here looking at Vietnam, Central America, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and then there's some still on target here, Iran and Venezuela. Let's see what he says. Have you ever noticed how all the places we make wars seem to be the same places that become refugee crises? And this guy's counting down, ready to push the button. 10, 9, 8, 7, counting down. Say, oh, sorry, I can't hear you. So we have this connection that usually when we have these interventions and kind of like intervene in the governments of other countries and usually concentrate our military in it, is where we do have a large population of asylum seekers and refugees coming into the United States, and people are like, why are they here? It's because we kind of created these situations, like Mr. Connect said, that was in the first box, the Coca-Cola, that like usually we create these situations in which it's peace for us, but it's terror in their countries. So it's not like something that's coming out of the blue. It's we've created these situations, and maybe private companies have gone in there and taken control as well, kind of like we saw in with the United Fruit Company as well. So we have all these entities, U.S. government, private companies going in and taking over, and we cause these horrible situations. And if it's not just their way of living, but it's also their safety. People's safety are in danger, so they need to flee. Like in El Salvador too. It's not just their way of living, but it's also their well-being. So that's why we have a lot of maybe emigration from these countries, because of this military industry complex. And finally, how do command economies cover social benefit costs? So we always compare our governments. Our economy. We're like, oh, look at France, everybody gets free education, or in Germany, everybody gets this super high education for free. Everybody gets universal health care. Everybody gets to like child care when they're pregnant, or even like nannies come and help you out and all this stuff in France. Like I had a cousin, she was pregnant and everything, and then she'd have someone come in and do her laundry and then take care of the baby, help her out, all for free. I was like, for free? What? She's like, yeah, it's free. Actually, goods and services are never free, even if the country has an economy directed by socialism. So like France, they have it's a mixed economy, but they do have a lot of van economy characteristics. It's because they have higher taxes. A lot of people pay a lot, like super high taxes compared to here. And so these taxes are the things that kind of cover these goods and services. So I think in France, it's about like 40% taxes, income tax that people pay. Over here, we pay around 30. And even the Scandinavian countries, they pay a little bit more. But with that, they're able to kind of budget and help out their society a little bit more in their community. And that's something like kind of like Bernie Sanders and a lot of people say, it's like, hey, like we want to erase student loan for everyone. Oh my goodness, that'd be amazing. I don't have to look at that. My Great Lakes loan thing just haunting me. Pay me. That'd be amazing, right? And everybody's like, oh yeah, like free universal health care, free education for all, and everybody's like, but how are you gonna pay that? It's like, well, with taxes, what else? And not everybody agrees with paying higher taxes. So that's something to consider. It's not free, it's with taxes.
So the main thing to take away, I think, for your next quiz, when we see this again, is if social services are gonna be provided in a larger extent, like Mr. Roca said, free education, universal health care, all of these things, they have to be paid for somehow, right? Because nothing is free. Just like Mr. Rojas said in the textbook says the example, there's no such thing as free lunch, right? So there's two ways that a government can pay for those increase in social services. One, increase taxes, or two, redistribute money from one program to another. It's just like the way you guys balance your budget when we were looking at the value of college unit and you have to think income and expenses. Either you increase your income for the government, which would be done with taxes, to pay for those social services, or you move money from one program to another. So for example, you take money out of war and you invest that in education. Or you take money out of border security and you put that into healthcare, or whatever it might be. You take money out of schools and you put that into healthcare maybe. You gotta either move around the money or bring in more money. Bring in more, change your expenses or increase your income. One of those has to happen. Right?
Cool.
So now we're going to do an activity. It's the Two Women's poem. And we're going to be looking at the situation from Chile. And so we're going to pass these out.
Yeah, we're going to have to share. So everyone, groups of two will get one copy of the poem. And if I can just frame this for you guys real quick as we're getting ready. So this is a very famous poem about Chile's transition from socialism to capitalism. The reason why we're choosing this poem is not only because it gives us additional insight into Chile's experience in the transition from socialism to capitalism, but it also gives us two very different perspectives from two very different women. And we want to think about how certain events are represented from two different perspectives, because for your articles about the economic causes and effects of immigration, you're going to need to choose to interview two different people who represent two different perspectives. So we want to take a little bit of practice in noticing what it's like to contrast two different perspectives. To get through this, we're going to have to recruit two young women readers, because this is a poem about two women. So we want woman 1 and woman 2. Who can help us out to read today? All right, come on up, Jessica. Let's get you guys.